Blue Marble Riders, what am I going to talk to you about today? Lots of things. First of all, I would like to thank Phil 480. I think I've got a little bit of it showing. I don't know. No, it looks like it's in there. But thanks, Phil. You had a little contest earlier on, probably in the fall, I think. And yeah, just before Christmas. And you drew my name. And I won a bunch of riding snoods. Gave one away because I don't really need three. Kept the grey one, kept the blue one. I got the blue one on. Thank you very much. When vlogging, of course, it's pretty hard to put one of those over your mouth. So I'm not stretched it up so you can't really see it. But it is underneath here. And it's keeping me lovely and warm. Thank you very much, Phil, for that. Top job. And not only that, Phil sent it to my mum in England. I went to visit Mumsy over Christmas and picked it up. What a great guy. So thanks, Phil. Really appreciate that. So what am I going to talk to you about today? Well, you probably noticed the title of this vlog is Formula One. And I've been a long time watcher of Formula One. I've watched Formula One since the early 70s. Yes, that gives you a hint about how old I am. Not that old. But I've watched for a long time. I watched when Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost dueled in the same team. I watched when they dueled in different teams. Some might call that the golden age of Formula One. I watched when Murray Walker's voice got somber and quiet in that infamous Grand Prix at Monza, where in an effort to out-duel the up-and-coming Michael Schumacher in his Benetton, Ayrton made perhaps a critical mistake, perhaps a piece of machinery failure, but whatever, he ended up with a suspension strut piercing his head through his helmet and died. I've watched when that same Michael Schumacher driving a Benetton had an accident and off in Australia, and then on getting back on the track, accidentally on purpose ran Damon Hill, his nearest rival, off the track. And I've watched, unfortunately, since the year 2000, the past 20 years or so, where increasingly companies have started to take a humongous role in Formula One, in particular Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari. Ferrari, of course, have always been there. Mercedes have fairly recent, and so are Red Bull. However, since 2000, in order, Ferrari have taken 5 back-to-back championships. Then it was Red Bull's turn to dominate and take 4 back-to-back championships. And then it was Mercedes' turn to dominate and take 5 back-to-back championships, 4 of those with Lewis Hamilton. And it's become bloated, plodding, processional. I'm fed up with watching cars go round the track one after the other. Qualifying is predictable, as indeed it was today in today's Bahrain Grand Prix, except for the fact that there was a little bit of interest because there was a new driver, Leclerc, a Frenchman, who's it's only his second race for Ferrari in Formula One, and yet somehow he was able to get pole position. It, in my opinion, is more about the cars now than the drivers, and that's a shame. The technology now is incredible and fantastic, but it's not equitable. It's not really as close governed formula as it should be. And why is that? Well, it's because there are companies like Mercedes and Ferrari in particular, 2 of the biggest companies in Formula One. Of course, Ferrari have been there since the 50s, dominating it. How do they dominate it? Well, it's simple. 1, finances. They're incredibly wealthy teams. 2, in Ferrari's case, believe it or not, no matter where they finish in the championship, they will get more money than anyone else. More money, more reward money than anyone else, even if they would come last. And finally, perhaps the most staggering of all, is that Ferrari have a veto. They have a veto over any rule regulation changes that the owners and managers of Formula One want to bring in. Ross Brawn right now is trying to bring in some very, very productive, progressive ideas about making the races closer and fairer. We all know there's issues with the aerodynamics of these cars where right now, if they are following another car, they lose 50% of their downforce. If they lose 50% of their downforce, they can no longer compete with the car in front, and consequently we get this processional racing. So recently, in the past year or two, I've just been sort of opting out, not watching as doggedly as I used to. My uncle Alan, who basically was my father, really, he was one of my fathers anyway, let's put it this way. He had a massive influence in my life. Taught me so many different things. The love of Formula One, interesting. He taught me how to fly. He taught me how to sail. He taught me the appreciation and love of motorcycles from an early age. He would be rolling in his grave with the state of Formula One right now. It's not that I don't watch it anymore. I do watch it. I watch it when there's rain. I watch it when they're at a venue I know is going to spring up some excellent racing and some enjoyable passing and overtakes, and allows for some unpredictability. So this may all seem very jaundiced and a bit of a rant, but it's actually, I'm going to turn this into a positive. Why am I going to turn this into a positive? Well, one, I'm taking more interest in MotoGP, but two, I stumbled across a brand new release on Netflix the other day, Drive to Survive. Fantastic 10-part series, basically a fly on the wall. You're a fly on the wall. It's a documentary. You're a fly on the wall in 8 of the 10 teams in Formula One, and you get to sit and listen to the inner workings of these teams, the bickering, the arguing, the politics. It doesn't sound very interesting until you watch it. It is fascinating, and as you really get to know about the personalities of the people running Formula One, and it actually gave me some hope, and I'll get to that in a minute. 2 teams, of course, did not participate in it, and initially you might think, well, this is a waste of time then, because Formula One's all about just 2 teams, isn't it? Ferrari and Mercedes. No, it isn't a waste of time. It actually was a breath of fresh air. So in this 10-part behind-the-scenes documentary where you're a fly on the wall, you get to see the inner workings of the 8 other teams. You get to see things like Force India's owner deal with the impending bankruptcy and extradition charges that he's faced in India. He's eccentric, he's a lovely guy, a sort of an Uncle Buck. His team love him, but unfortunately he's leveraged his team so hugely. Oh, there's a Porsche rally going on here. Look at that. Oh, well, not really, it's a 944 at the back. That's not a Porsche. Sorry, any 944 owners. Anyways, leveraged his team, and you get to see the ins and outs of how the bankruptcy takes place. It sounds very boring, but it isn't. The talks to the team about whether they're going to get paid or not. Okay, but more interesting than that, you then get to see Claire Williams managing her father's team, struggling to deal with spoilt brat driver Lance Stroll and his extremely rich financier father. The only reason Lance got the drive is because his dad is very wealthy. I can say that I'm an English, born in England, English citizen, and also a Canadian citizen. And I initially wanted to follow Lance, but he's got very little in the way of talent, I'm afraid. And he's got his position purely because his father financially backs him, and Williams need the money. And there is his father interacting with Claire Williams, trying to leverage and tilt the team in his son's favor in a Trump-like sort of hostile takeover, if you like. It's fascinating to watch that. And then there's the Red Bull Verstappen Ricciardo problems that take place for Christian Horner. And Christian Horner, you get to see a darker side of Christian Horner. He's not the affable, good-looking character that you might think. There's a definite bias in that team, and unfortunately Ricciardo is on the other side of it, and he wrestles the season long with whether he should leave the team. And I'm not spilling the beans here, I'm not spoiling the plot to tell you, of course he does eventually go to Renault, and this is a big problem. It happens, it's announced 2/3 of the way through the season last year that he's going to Renault, and so then Renault and Red Bull, who already don't like each other because Renault supply the engines for Red Bull, and Red Bull are underwhelmed by their performance, to say the least, constantly at each other's throats about the engine and the fact that, you know, in Renault's opinion, Red Bull have packaged it wrongly in their car, causing issues. Probably not true, because Renault's own cars are suffering massive failures too last season. But and Red Bull, you know, they're underpowered, underwhelmed, overpromised, etc. So it's fascinating. And then, of course, when Ricciardo makes his move, announces his move to Renault, after you go through the whole 2/3 of the season with him in private consultation with his agent, talking about this, and then talking to the camera and saying how he feels and what's got to happen, and whether he should do this, and finally he does it. Let's get off that in case it's oil. Yeah, that's nasty. It could be fuel or diesel. We'll stay away from that. Finally he does the jump, and oh my goodness, Christian Horner, what a biting, dark, humoured, sarcastic wit that man has. He immediately goes to Cyril, the manager of the Renault team, and they have it out. And then from then on there's bickers and sarcasm and one-upmanship between the two of them for the rest of the season, which you frequently come back to and figure out. It's just, what is that? Air conditioner? Gasoline? Diesel? I'll tell you what it is though. It's bad for motorcycles. We'll stay off it. And if that isn't all enough, then the pièce de la résistance is the Haas team. Haas, you say? What the hell? What the hell are you talking about? What a boring team. Ferrari's works team, if you like, the skunk works for Ferrari, you know, where Ferrari test all their parts, and if they work, they go on the Ferrari car and make them faster. Boring? No, not at all. You've heard me previously often say that I really enjoyed the original Office with Ricky Gervais in it, where he plays the manager of a firm. His name is David Brent. Well, if you watch this series, you will see Gunther Steiner, who is the manager of the Haas team, operate exactly like David Brent does. Whether that's by act, by demeanor, I suspect the latter. He seems very, very similar to David Brent. David Brent had an appalling, awkward, oh God, it was painful but humorous to watch management style, where he was completely inappropriate, over the top, and thought he was basically God. Well, Gunther Steiner strikes me as exactly the same. Inappropriate, awkward, you never know what you're going to get with him. And Romain Grosjean is one of his racers, as is Magnussen. He's the other one, and you've got these two racers, Grosjean and Magnussen, racing each other. And Grosjean's a good racer, but unfortunately at the beginning of last season he started to make a lot of silly mistakes, and Gunther Steiner has absolutely no patience for this. So halfway through the season, Gunther Steiner has one of these motivational dinners for his team, gets the whole team together minus Romain Grosjean, and he's giving a speech. Everyone's watching him. Gunther Steiner says, a typical David Brent move. Maybe Romain Grosjean isn't here because he has no points. Or maybe he isn't here because he doesn't deserve any food. Ha 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 ha. Laughs his head off. Only a small fraction of the audience actually laugh at that, one of which is Magnussen, but it's an uncomfortable sort of laugh. Most of them have got their eyes open, their jaws dropped in disbelief, just like you would have seen the co-workers with David Brent in The Office. Remarkably funny. It's a very interesting show. Even if you're not interested in Formula One, you will find this fascinating if you're interested in the dynamics and interaction between people, especially in a workplace environment, albeit a very different workplace environment. I found it scintillating and was absolutely captivated by it in a way that the actual racing hasn't done for many, many years. Watching Lando Norris, watching George Russell, and this is how predictable Formula One is. George Russell is every bit as good as Lando Norris, the two new English rookies. George Russell is at the back of the pack in Williams, so far off the pace it's not funny. And Lando Norris is at McLaren, a mid-team. Lando Norris is going to make it in Formula One, and I'll go this far. In 4 years, George Russell will be a memory, not because of his driving. He's a brilliant driver, but because of the car he's in. And that, in essence, is what's wrong with Formula One. It really isn't an equal playing field, and you do see processions. Given that, and given this series that I have watched and seen and really enjoyed, I am going to continue now to watch Formula One, at least for the short term, just because of this Netflix series that I watched. I really hope that Netflix release another one next year for this season that we're watching right now.
Once again, thanks for watching, everyone. If this is the first time you've watched, please consider subscribing. I do product reviews, motorcycle reviews, off-road and on-road vlogs, as well as tours. Don't forget to follow me on social media, that's Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and to like, and especially, I'm begging you here folks, subscribe. This is the BlueMarbleRider, out.